Hello, I'm Susan Van Sickle, Consulting Director here at Christian Adoption Consultants. Today, I wanted to break down some of the most common adoption myths and assumptions and offer some insight from my experience working in adoption. As with everything else, we know education is the best way to address what we assume we know. Education also helps with what we learn from outdated practices or ill-portrayed media. Knowledge is power, and that's especially true when it comes to learning about adoption. So here's our first myth for today. Adoption is a happy ending for everyone. This is a really commonly held belief. But here's the truth. Adoption is a complex mix of joy and challenges. There's an assumption that adoption looks a little bit like a fairy tale, with nothing but smiles and sweet stories, and happily ever afters. But you've heard us say before that adoption always begins with brokenness. The reality is that if sin and brokenness weren't a part of our world, adoption wouldn't be either, and birth families would always be in a position to parent their children. Adoption doesn't just begin with brokenness, it can be woven throughout. There's a child living outside their biological family and possibly outside their ethnic culture. There's a birth family who continues a life without that child, and the impact of the grief and infertility for an adoptive family, it doesn't go away simply because a family was grown through adoption. This doesn't mean that God doesn't meet us in our brokenness and can't redeem it. But being aware and acknowledging the tension this reality creates is so valuable when considering all that's involved in adoption. Here's another common myth, and this one is a little more on a practical level. A family needs to have everything in order, especially their finances, before beginning the adoption process. But here's the truth. There are resources available to help families starting from the very beginning to help a family begin their adoption process. It's common that families believe they have to have everything figured out before beginning the adoption journey. While there's wisdom in having a plan, I found that a lot of families can get really paralyzed simply with the amount of decisions there are to be made in adoption, like where will we get our home study? How do we feel about open adoption? What about becoming a transracial family? How will we come up with the cost? How do we find a good attorney? The questions can seem really endless. But the good news is adoptive families don't have to have all the answers to begin the process of adopting. And even better, they don't have to go it alone. There's a limit to the amount of Googling and information seeking that can be done on the front end and without knowing how to filter what's helpful or what's not. So finding an adoption professional to help guide a family through and a community to help that family is key to a successful adoption. Once that's in place, a hopeful adoptive family can confidently move forward, knowing they have the resources at hand that they need to adopt. So if you're looking for help on your adoption journey, you're in the right place. We would love to help you here at Christian Adoption Consultants. Feel free to reach out to us anytime.